Boa noite, pessoal. Bem-vindos e bem-vindas. Nós estamos chegando ao último conteúdo da quinta edição do Festival Alma. O Festival Alma foi criado pelo Grupo ANGA, Instituto Capitalismo Consciente Brasil, Sistema B e HSM, com a intenção de trazer inspiração, trocas de alto nível neste momento onde a gente está tanto precisando. Hoje nós chegamos ao último conteúdo da semana, onde nós estaremos recebendo o professor Raj Sisodia para o lançamento do livro Empresas que Curam, aqui no Brasil. Para quem está chegando, vocês têm a opção de ter traduções em português ou inglês. É só vocês acessarem um botão que está aqui embaixo, vocês podem mudar para português ou para inglês. Gostaria de compartilhar minha tela para agradecer. Agradecer às empresas, às organizações que estão permitindo que esse festival aconteça. Ele tem a realização do Grupo ANGA, com a realização do Instituto Capitalismo Consciente Brasil, Sistema B. Também conta com o apoio do Instituto ANGA, da Cura, da Eureka, da Tribo, da Humanos de Negócio, da 08, da própria Humanizadas e da Vida Simples. Essa é uma edição especial do Festival Alma, com curadoria de conteúdo realizada pela Humanizadas. Enquanto nós vamos recepcionando as pessoas que estão chegando, gostaria de convidar a Jess Condado para ela tocar 2 musiquinhas para nós. É uma boa forma de a gente poder recepcionar as pessoas neste momento e uma ótima forma de a gente poder incentivar a arte e a cultura no país em um momento em que eles são extremamente necessários. Para quem tiver interesse, já até faço o convite e a divulgação do playlist da Jess no Spotify para vocês seguirem ela depois, é imperdível. Jess, é com você.
Boa noite, todo mundo. Um prazer estar mais uma vez aqui. Escolhi uma música com uma letra maravilhosa, onde fala de não focarmos nas diferenças para evitar conflitos, guerras innecessárias. E diz assim: Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world would be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. The brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say Maybe I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you will join us, and the world will be as one. When the night has come and the land is dark and the moon is the only light you see, no, I won't be afraid. No, I won't be afraid. Just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand now. Stand by me. Stand by me. If the sky that we look upon should tremble and fall, all the mountains should crumble to the sea, I won't cry, I won't cry, no, I won't shed no tears, just as long as you stand by me. So darling, darling, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Oh, stand now. Stand by me. Stand by me. Believe me when I tell you, come on, stand by me. Oh, stand by me. Stand by me. Stand by me. Stand by me. Obrigada.
Beautiful.
Thank you. Estarei por aqui. I'll be here.
Obrigado, Jess. Lindo, lindo. Obrigado. Olá, pessoal. Sejam bem-vindos e bem-vindas. Estamos começando aqui o último conteúdo do Festival Alma, dessa quinta edição que se encerra hoje, uma edição especial com curadoria da Humanizadas. Hoje é uma palestra de lançamento do livro do professor Raj Sisodia, o livro Empresas que Curam. Ao final da palestra, a gente vai mostrar um QR Code para vocês terem acesso a um livro autografado pelo próprio Raj. E para quem está chegando, vocês têm a opção aqui embaixo de mudar a forma de tradução que vocês querem estar escutando essa palestra. Vocês podem utilizar português ou inglês. E para quem está chegando também, fiquem à vontade para trazer perguntas e ao longo da conversa a gente vai coletando as perguntas de vocês e trazendo para o professor Raj. Tá? Eu não me apresentei ainda. Eu sou o Pedro Paro, CEO e fundador da Humanizadas, uma startup de impacto. Também sou diretor de educação do Instituto Capitalismo Consciente Brasil. E para mim é um prazer enorme poder estar aqui hoje recepcionando vocês e estar podendo fazer essa conexão com o professor Raj para a gente poder ouvir um pouquinho do novo livro dele. Gostaria também de abrir um espaço a quem vai estar ajudando na facilitação dessa conversa comigo, é a Daniela Garcia. Dani, quer se apresentar para o pessoal?
Claro. Boa noite a todos. É um prazer estar aqui com você, Pedro, com você, professor Raj. Eu sou Daniela Garcia, diretora de operações e associações do Instituto Capitalismo Consciente, o chapter brasileiro da instituição que foi cofundada pelo professor Raj em 2010. Vai ser um prazer estar aqui com vocês até o final e depois a gente conduz as perguntas que chegarem até ele.
E na sequência nós teremos agora uma apresentação do professor Raj e na sequência da apresentação do Raj nós vamos para uma sessão de perguntas e respostas. O Raj dispensa apresentações. professor da Babson College de Marketing, um dos fundadores do movimento global Capitalismo Consciente, e não apenas é um dos motivos de estarmos aqui, enquanto Instituto Capitalismo Consciente Brasil, mas, inclusive, é um dos motivos de termos feito a curadoria dessa edição especial do Festival Alma. Raj, nós tivemos 3 dias de evento e muito desenhados para poder te receber no último dia, tá? Então, para a gente é uma honra e um prazer enorme poder estar te ouvindo nesta noite. Raj, se você pudesse apresentar um pouquinho para as pessoas, e a palavra é sua para fazer sua apresentação. Muito obrigado, tá?
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you, Daniela. And thank you to all the others involved in organizing this. I wish I could be there in person with all of you. Part of my heart is in Brazil always. And I've been many times, and I hope to come back soon. Today I'm going to talk to you about my new book, which is now being launched in Portuguese. It came out here in the US last September. The book is called The Healing Organization. And when we wrote that book, of course, there was no pandemic, and there was economic crisis in a way in the world, lots of economic suffering, but we didn't have the kind of economic dislocation that we've had now, and the social unrest and the racial injustice and everything that is going on. So the need for healing is even greater today. So I'm going to share my screen here, and we'll go through a presentation and then engage in a conversation with all of you. So the theme today is healing our world. How can we heal our world, and what is the role of business in that? You know a little bit about my background. I think already I'm a professor at Babson College. I co-founded the Conscious Capitalism movement in 2008, and I'm also the founder of a company called Awaken Inc. And just to give you a little bit of my journey, over the last, I've been a professor for 35 years now, but really the last 15 years, I would say starting in 2005, my life changed. Before that, I was practicing the normal way of thinking about business. That's what I had been taught in my MBA and my PhD. That's what I was teaching. Business is only about profit, only about shareholders. It's a sort of a tough, dog eat dog world. It's not personal. It's very dehumanized. It's all about the numbers, all about the profits. But then I discovered a different path, or I was guided towards my real purpose and journey of my life. And with the book called Firms of Endearment, which actually now has been replicated in some way in Brazil, the similar research, but trying to find companies that are loved by everybody. Customers love them, employees love them, communities embrace them, they're good for society, good for the planet, etc. Right? So that book was a big, big turning point in my life. It led me to meet the CEO of Whole Foods, John Mackey, one of the companies that we had featured. So he and I and some others then started the Conscious Capitalism movement in 2008. And then a few years later, we wrote this book, Conscious Capitalism. And then my journey has continued as I've thought about business in this way. One of the big gaps that I saw was that we have too much masculine energy in business and not enough feminine energy. And that's true actually in the whole world, in every sector of society, that we don't have enough feminine, not enough women, but also the feminine energy that is present within all human beings. The compassion, the caring, that side of us has been missing to a large extent. So that this book is really about elevating the feminine and integrating that with the masculine so that we create a better world. We lead from a place of wholeness. And then a book called Everybody Matters, which I'll talk about a little bit later today as well. The idea that business is really about treating everybody like family. And everybody has to matter. In a family, you can't say some people matter and other people don't matter. Everybody matters. And everybody has to succeed. Everybody has to win. Right? And then we did a field guide, which is how do you implement these ideas? And then, of course, the most recent book is The Healing Organization that came out, which is what we will talk about today. But if I had to articulate my purpose before we get into that, I would say that my purpose now is to bring heart, healing, and soul to business and to leadership so that we can build a better world for all. The world of business operates purely from the head, and it's all about the numbers. And we end up using people and even abusing people to do that. But we have to bring our whole human selves and bring all of these elements, and then we can indeed change the world. in a dramatic way. Of course, we are dealing with this crisis now for the last 6 months or so, and it's really, in some ways, I think we may look back on this year 2020 and say, this was a medicine that we needed. The virus can become a medicine if we really look at the lessons that we have to learn from this, right? So we have to think differently. We have to think collectively. We have to think at a global level. We have to cooperate with each other, and we have to care for everybody as a human being. If we don't care for everybody, then everybody will suffer, right? Because those people we don't care for, if they get sick, they infect. I mean, there's just many sort of parallels here and metaphors, right? That everybody matters. We have to care for everybody, and we have to cooperate in order to do that. And to me, it's a reminder of this fundamental fact. Why are we here as human beings on this planet? I believe that we are here to evolve ourselves and to take care of each other, to realize our own potential and do that in service of each other. And business is a way we can do those things at scale. In my real life, I can only take care of 5 people, 10 people. But if I start a company, I can take care of 100 people, 1,000 people, 10,000 people. There's no limit, really. But we see business as a way to care and to scale caring in the world. That's really what the name of the game is. So if I think about the times that we live in, not only this year, but just zooming back a little bit, just the overall time period, the early part of the 21st century, I'm reminded of a classic book by Charles Dickens called A Tale of Two Cities. And he wrote these words: it was the best of times and it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom and it was the age of foolishness. It was the season of light and darkness, spring of hope, winter of despair. And I think in many ways, that's the kind of world we're living in right now. There are many things that are exceptionally better than they have ever been. Right? Our per capita incomes are much higher than they ever were in human history. Our life expectancy is higher. Our literacy rate is higher. Right? Many other things are better than ever before. It's the best time to be born a human being is around, this era in the 21st century. And yet, it is also one of the worst times because we have never faced the kind of threats. I'm not talking about the pandemic now. I'm talking about existential threats like climate change, right? Global warming and many other environmental disasters, the mass extinction that we're living through of species, and all the other kinds of things. So simultaneously, it's the best of times and worst of times. And what it says to me is that we have to choose the path forward. Are we going to evolve towards the light, or are we going to go towards the darkness? And a lot of that has to do with how we operate in the world of business. If we truly become conscious and caring and healing organizations, then in fact, we will make this not both of those, but actually only the best of times. And that's what we have to do. So if you think about life, life, of course, is beautiful. Life is filled with wonder and joy. But life is also difficult and tragic in many ways and filled with suffering. There are thousands of children dying every day, about 15,000 children without the pandemic. They're dying from hunger and from malaria and other things, right? There's just a lot of suffering in the world. Now, on the one hand, if you look at on the positive side, prosperity has risen. As I said, per capita incomes have gone up 1,500% in the last 200 years. Life expectancy has gone up. All those things I talked about. Physical violence is down. We're living in the most peaceful time in human history, as Steven Pinker wrote about in his book, The Better Angels of Our Nature. But at the same time, planetary suffering and psychic suffering is rising. Depression, anxiety, drug addiction, suicides are all rising quite rapidly, especially here in the US, but really around the world. So there's a lot of psychic suffering that we are still experiencing as human beings. So there's something not working very well in our lives. And if you look at just the last 100 years, 1 century of what I would call the modern era, modern living with all of the conveniences and the technologies and, electronics and electricity and communications and airplanes, and all of that, right? We've had for the last 100 years or so. What has been the consequence of that? That we see that 80% of our natural forests that have been around for thousands, tens of thousands, even millions of years, 80% of them are gone. That 30% of the land that we were able to use for food production is no longer usable. It has become like a desert. The soil is dead. That 90% of the large mammals have disappeared in the last century. And 95% of the large fish in the ocean are gone. And on the other side, of course, we have factory farms. So we have destroyed most of natural life, wildlife, but then we have massive numbers. I know this is a big industry in Brazil, right? Factory farming. But the scale of this is staggering. 75 billion animals and 100 billion fish are killed annually after they live in these factory farms, right? When they are kept in cages and they are kept in very small space and they are fed an unnatural diet. Essentially, they are tortured for their short lives and then they are killed, right, to feed our hunger. And that's in addition to 1 trillion wild fish. So there's a lot of suffering that we don't even see, right? We only see in the supermarket. It looks very pretty. But behind that is a lot of suffering that is being caused by humans for humans, right? For the benefit of other humans. But I believe that all suffering matters, even the suffering of animals. We know that we are living through the 5th mass extinction in the history of this planet, and the first one that is largely caused by human activity. Half of the species alive today are likely to disappear. Something like 100 species are disappearing every day, okay? And never to come back. And then if you look at the impact on our health, the toxic burdens on our bodies, on human beings is rising. 100 years ago, cancer was almost unknown. It was a rare disease. The most recent estimate is that 44% of Americans can expect to get cancer, 50% of men. And that number used to be 25%, in the 80s. And we have diabetes and we have obesity and many other, the average newborn baby has 187 known carcinogens, chemicals that cause cancer in their cord blood. Right? So our atmosphere is filled with toxic elements. And we see that in the pollution, right? So pollution actually kills 9 million people every year, which is way more than wars and terrorism and civil strife. And this is all because of how we do business. We don't have to pollute in the way that we pollute in order to make money and to make products. But it's cheaper to do it that way, and we don't care. And nobody tells us not to do that, right? And hence we are causing this extraordinary pollution. And that has a cost to society of almost $5 trillion a year, the environmental cost. And this is not factoring in the cost of all those people who died, right? The human cost. So there's a lot of suffering in the world. And I think, therefore, we need to think about healing. We have to recognize that we need to heal ourselves. Each of us, every single one of you watching and listening on this, we have to heal ourselves. We have traumas that we're carrying around. We have things that we need to heal in our families and in our communities. We have to heal our countries. The United States has never been more divided politically. People in the same family don't talk to each other. This is true in India. I'm sure it's true in Brazil, in England, many countries. We need to heal our companies as well. There's a lot of history and a lot of suffering inside companies, which we will talk about. We also need to heal our planet and its ability to sustain life. We are destroying our mother, if you will think about it that way. Our planet is our mother, and we are killing our mother. We are the only species that systematically destroys its own habitat. No other species does that. And we need to heal the past, the present, and the future. There are things that we can do today in the present in order to heal the past. What happened 10 years ago, 100 years ago. We have to still heal. If we don't heal that, we actually cannot move forward into the future. I know in the United States, we have never healed from the history of slavery, which is why we are having massive protests even now. 401 years after slavery started in the US, we are still dealing with it because we haven't healed it. We have not apologized. We have not made amends to the people who suffered, who have the ancestral trauma that they are carrying. South Africa did a good job after the end of apartheid. There are hundreds of years of apartheid, but they had a truth and reconciliation process that enabled people to acknowledge the suffering that they had caused on others, to apologize, to beg forgiveness, and then to move forward. And they were able to do that. We need to do that everywhere in the world. So the need for healing is paramount, and therefore we all need to be healers now. I believe that every single one of us can think of ourselves as a healer. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer or a business leader or a professor. It doesn't matter. I think you should think of yourself as a healer. What does that mean? You reduce suffering in the world, you bring more joy. and you promote healthy growth. That's what healing is. As the Dalai Lama said, our prime purpose in this life is to help others. If you cannot help them, at least don't hurt them. The fact is that actually we are hurting each other. The vast majority of people are causing suffering for other people, not always intentionally. A lot of business leaders will hear this message and say, I'm not trying to cause any suffering. I'm just trying to give jobs and make products and run a business. Yes, but if you do not consciously choose to be part of the healing, you are probably part of the hurting. Because there are things that are happening in your company, you don't even realize the suffering that is going on. The way in which your policies, the way you lead, manage, organize is causing suffering for people. How do we change this? James Baldwin was a wonderful writer in the US and civil rights activist as well. And he said, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. We have to actually be willing to look at this reality, to say, yes, I have caused suffering. I am causing suffering right now. And now what can I do to change it? What are some of the measures of suffering? We know that heart attacks are 20% higher on Mondays. Think about that. Our work is literally killing us. 20% higher heart attacks. Estimate in this book was that 120,000 Americans die every year from the stress connected to work. Not the work itself. It's the way we lead, manage, and organize that's causing that. The estimate is that 600,000 Chinese die every year from overwork. In fact, they had to invent a new word called gualaozi, which means death from overwork. And even in Japan, they had to invent a similar word. Our work is literally killing people. This is the human cost. Next time you buy an iPhone, think about the human cost underneath that. The people who died, what happened to their families, what happened to their children, all of the environment, of extreme stress and overwork. The human cost of doing business does not show up on an income statement or a balance sheet. And yet it may be the biggest cost that we are incurring. And the sad irony is that even our healing professions have become places of suffering. Doctors, nurses, and veterinarians have higher rates of drug addiction, suicide than the average population. Even though they are doing noble work, they are following their purpose, they are healing other people, and yet they themselves are suffering because of the way we manage and run and lead our organizations, in this case, our hospitals. We are causing suffering even in the middle of higher purpose and noble work. So the way we work, the way we do business is not working. But I believe that if you do it right, business does not have to cause suffering. Actually, business can do the opposite. It can reduce suffering and increase joy in our lives. So what I'm talking about today is not healing businesses. It's not saying we need more yoga studios and massage parlors and those kinds of businesses. No, it's saying that business itself, doesn't matter what your business is, can be done in a way that is healing and does not hurt other people. Doesn't matter what business. You could be installing air conditioners, you could be doing landscaping, but you can do all of that in a way that is healing. So done right, business can be a place of healing for those who work there. You can leave at the end of every day physically, mentally, emotionally, socially, and spiritually better off than when you came in the morning. It can be a source of healing for those we serve, our customers, our communities. It can improve their life and reduce their suffering by meeting their real needs. And business can be a force for healing in society. We can show how people come together despite their ethnic, religious, social, cultural, political differences and work together with shared values, higher purpose, with joy, and do something extraordinary. This is a model for how society can function if you do it right. So the first part of the book is showing how business has become a place of suffering for so many. The second part is really stories. We have about 25 stories of companies that are actually not causing suffering. They're actually bringing healing. And I'd just like to share a few of those here before we end. One of them we call the parable of the pothole. Pothole is like an unexpected thing that happens in life, right? You're driving along the highway, suddenly you hit a pothole, and now you have an accident. Your tire blows out, right? And you have to deal with it. So life has that. So this is a story of a company called Apple Tree Answers, which is a call center company. They basically answer the phone for other companies for customer service, right? And they have, like many companies, they've got about 10-15% of the employees that are white collar, college educated, professional managers, right? And then 85% of their people are hourly paid, not college educated. They're actually doing the work. They're answering the phones and doing the work that you're actually generating revenue from. But life is very different for these two groups of people. It's almost like there's a caste system. India, there's a caste system where you have different, you're born into different levels. Here in businesses, you have these two very different groups. So if you look at the culture as a whole, you might say, what is my turnover rate? What is my engagement rate? But that doesn't mean anything if you break it out by saying, what about the full-time people and the part-time people? What is the difference? You find huge differences. And that was true in this company. So John Ratliff was the CEO of this company. He had grown it quite to a large extent through mergers. And then he was looking at the culture and saying, wow, my engagement rate overall is not very good. But if you break it out, you find that for the college educated professional managers, it's pretty good. But for the hourly people, it was very bad. It's like 10-12%. And then he looked at turnover, like how often do people leave the company? And again, he found it was pretty good for the full-time salaried people. And for the others, it was 118%. In other words, people lasted only about 10 months before they left. So he said, I want to figure out why that is, and I want to change. I want to improve life for these hourly workers. I started to ask them, why is it that people are leaving? I said, well, first of all, the chairs are very uncomfortable. We have a backache at the end of every day. So he said, oh my God, we're going to get you new chairs. And after that, he started telling them, please tell us one thing every day that we can do to improve your life at work. So they made a lot of changes. And of course, they were not getting paid very well. So he started to pay them better as well. But then he also realized that many of them are living on the edge. The statistic is that about 50% of Americans have less than $400 in the bank. And if they needed $2,000 within 30 days, they would not be able to raise it. So we realized that people are living on the edge of financial disaster. And so the story we use is that imagine the chief financial officer of the company is driving to work in her Mercedes, and it hits this pothole on the road, and the tire blows out and the rim gets damaged. Well, all she has to do is call AAA, right, which is the service that comes and helps you. And then she gets a lift to the office, and she arrives 1 hour late, and everybody said, oh my God, are you okay? That must have been so scary that, your car hit that. You're bringing her coffee. And it's not a big deal for her. And that afternoon, the car gets delivered, it's repaired, it's washed, it's cleaned, everything is fine. Now he said, imagine one of the hourly workers had the same experience in her 14-year-old car, and she has the tire blow out and the rim get damaged. She does not have AAA service, so she has to call other companies to get this towing done. And then she has to call a friend to be dropped off at the office because she doesn't have the money to pay for a taxi or a cab. And then she arrives 3 hours late. And the receptionist says, oh, the supervisor is really angry and he's waiting for you. And she goes, and the supervisor reprimands her and tells her that if you do this again, this is like a black check mark against your record. If you do 2 more of these, then you will be fired. And at the end of that, he tells her, okay, now you go answer the phones and be nice to our customers. Take care of our customers. So this woman, her life is falling apart. She has no idea how she's going to pay, what it's going to cost. She only has $160 in the bank. How is she going to pay for that car to get repaired? How will she come to work? How will she take her children to their daycare? Her life is falling apart, and yet we don't even care. We kick her when she's down. So John said, I want to help people. So he created a program called Dream On. He said, if you need help, if something happens in your life, emergency of some kind, please let us know and we can help you. We don't want you to suffer. You don't want your family to suffer. Now they put that out there, and for about 8 days, nothing happened. Nobody responded. And said, wow, we know that people are suffering. How come nobody's responding? And then finally, after 8 days, they got a message from a woman. And she said, I am so sorry, but I need help. She said, my ex-husband stopped paying alimony 2 weeks ago and child support, and I got thrown out of my apartment a week ago. And I've been living in a car now with my 2 children for a week. And I'm sorry, I just can't do this to them anymore. I need help. And, John Ratliff saw this, and as soon as he read it, he said, he had tears in his eyes. And he said, I felt a deep sense of shame. So what kind of a leader am I? What kind of a company am I running? I have a full-time employee who's a mother, and she's homeless for a week and she can't even tell us until a week goes by. So of course they immediately helped her. They got her into a hotel that night, and they helped her get into a new apartment within a week. And they said to her, we can keep this secret. We don't have to tell anybody if you want your privacy. She said, no, nobody has ever done anything this nice for me in my entire life. I will tell everybody I know. And of course the word got out, and I know after that the floodgates opened and so many people were suffering. Many people were homeless. Lots of things were happening, and they helped each and every one of them. And if you fast forward 1 year, this company, the employee turnover was 118%, went down to 16% because they became a place of caring and healing. And of course, their business performance improved dramatically, right? When people become loyal and they stay and they become experts and become productive, right? So again, when you do the right thing, you care for people, they take care of the business, right? But you don't do it for that reason. You do it because we are supposed to take care of people. We're supposed to be kind to people. Another story I have, I call it serving and uplifting the innocent. There are people in the world that we would call innocent. This is N.K. Chaudhary from a city in India called Jaipur. And he started this company called Jaipur Rugs. And he said, I did it because I want to serve the innocents. He said, carpets in India are made by women. And they come from the weaving community. There's a different caste that actually they are born into this, and this is all they do. And they're considered untouchable. One of the worst things about India in the caste system is that the lowest caste, there are people who, because they do basic menial work, other people in the higher caste won't even touch them, won't even look at them in some cases. And he said, these women are innocent. They have never done any harm to anybody. Their entire life, nobody has taken care of them. All they have done is serve everybody else, from their parents to their siblings to their husbands and their in-laws to their own children. And they take care and they serve everybody else, and everybody else abuses them. Their parents don't feed them enough, they don't educate them, and then they get married, and then they have to have children and cook and clean, and they have to make carpets, and their husband might be alcoholic and abuse them, and then the contractors who come to the villages with these contracts, they abuse them. They don't pay them what they promise them. They will physically, emotionally, sexually abuse them sometimes. And Mr. Chaudhary said, I want to serve the innocents. I want to make their life better. And this is Shanti, this woman on the right. I interviewed her, and that was her story. She was born into this family. She was almost died of starvation, abused by everybody until she found this company. And now her life has completely turned around. There are 20 women who work with her, and they make these beautiful carpets. And, I went and had a meal in her house. And I asked her, how do you feel about this company? How do you feel about Mr. Chaudhary? And she just started crying. She said, I don't have enough words. She said, to me, he is more than my mother and my father. To me, he is God, because he has given me life. Before this, I didn't have a life. Now, this woman has 6 children. And she was illiterate, and now she knows how to read and write and do basic accounting. And her 6 children, 2 are already in college. One is graduated, one is in 11th grade, one is in 10th grade. The youngest is in 7th. 6 children born from this illiterate, untouchable woman will now go to college. And their lives will be changed, and their children's lives will be changed. There's a multi-generational effect that this has. And this is a for-profit business, right? I'm not talking about non-profits here. These are all businesses. And you see the level of healing, and there are 40,000 women that are in this system whose lives are being changed. Another example is that of challenging industry norms. Every industry has certain rules by which they operate. This is how we do things in consulting. This is how we do things in construction. Well, why? You have to look at all those norms. So this was a story about consulting. So JBN Consulting was started by 3 people who were in Accenture. And when they were young, the job was exciting, but then they got married, and then they had children. And then they said, oh my God, I'm gone Monday to Friday every week. I will never see my children growing up. When I go on the weekend, things are so busy anyway. I will miss their childhood. I will not be connected to my own children. That is too high a cost to pay. We love being consultants, but we don't want to miss the childhood of our own children. So they decided to leave Accenture, and they said, we're going to set up a different kind of consulting firm, where all the clients will be local. You don't have to travel for work. This is based in Atlanta. We have enough big companies in Atlanta, enough business in Atlanta, right? So you don't have to travel. You can be home every night for dinner. You can, coach the soccer game for your children, whatever you want to do. And if we have more business in Dallas, we'll open an office in Dallas, which they did, and in Chicago and in Charlotte. So what they said in this company is that the children of our employees are stakeholders in our company. And think about that. The well-being of children is directly impacted by the experience that their parents have at work. And when you think of them, then actually the family evaluates this company every year to say, how good is this company treating us as a family, right? So again, a different way of healing. And this is again healing the future generation. The last example I want to share is about what I call social sadness. In every society, there are things that don't work very well that are part of the sort of dark side. One of the dark sides of American society is the criminal justice system. And I think it's true in Brazil as well. The highest percentage of people in the world that are in prison are in the US. USA has more prisoners per capita as well as overall than any other country in the world, including China, including Korea, including Cuba. It doesn't matter which country. 70 million Americans have some kind of criminal record. The same number that have a college degree. So there's an application form, and on that there's a question: have you ever been convicted, etc. And 70 million Americans would have to check yes. And when they do that, they can't get a job because they will be screened out. And therefore they don't have the ability, even though they've paid their price to society. In many cases, they have served more time than they should. And yet there's no opportunities, doors are closed to them. So this company was started, this Greyston Bakery was started in Yonkers by a Buddhist Zen master named Bernie Glassman. And he said, I want to give people a first chance. There are millions of people in our country that don't even get a first chance. They are born into poverty. They grow up in a violent ghetto. They're surrounded by drugs and guns and violence. And they have terrible schools and they have no role models. And they get caught up in that system when they were teenagers, and then the rest of their life is ruined. He said, I want to give them a first chance, a chance to start their life again. So he started this bakery. And he said, we don't hire people to bake brownies. We actually bake brownies so that we can hire people. This company exists so that it can create opportunity for people who never had an opportunity. And the impact of that has been dramatic on people. This is Dion Drew, who came and spoke at our conference, and he was crying when he talked. He said, if it was not for this company, I would be dead or back in jail. Every time I came out, I would look for a job, nobody would hire me, and then I have to survive. I can't starve. I would end up back on the street doing something, get me in trouble. And he said now he's got a 6-year-old daughter, he has an apartment, he makes $60,000 a year, he's a training manager. This is what business can do. So, whether you're a healing organization or a hurting organization depends on the leaders. The leader sets the tone. As I say, the macrocosm, what shows up outside, is a function of what is inside. And if you as a leader are not healed, if you have your own trauma from your childhood or whatever, right? And you're going to bring that into your leadership and you're going to hurt other people. As they say, we are victims of victims. So people end up hurting other people because they themselves are hurt. So the first thing we need to do is become a healing leader. In other words, you have to heal yourself. And I had to go through that journey myself before writing this book, which I think Pedro and I will talk about later. You cannot be a healing force in the world unless you heal yourself first. And if you look at the impact of leadership on business and whether you're a healing leader or not, one of the parallels we use in the book is we compare 3G Capital with Barry Wehmiller. And to me, 3G Capital, which by some measures has been very successful, they've grown, they've acquired tons of companies, and all three of the founders are billionaires, 10 billion plus, right? But what is the energy behind that? It's acquiring companies in order to grow, to create more wealth for the owners, right? There's a lot of ego. It's like building or growing an empire. If you think about in human history, where you had Alexander was a king, and then he said, I want to become Alexander the Emperor. I want to become Alexander the Great, right? Which means I want to create an empire that spreads around the world. And I control everything around the world. And that's coming from a place of ego. But what happens when you grow that empire? How do you grow that? You grow it by conquest. You grow it by war, by killing. There's an enormous amount of suffering that happens when you grow an empire and when you grow a business empire. This company, I would say, has caused a lot of suffering when they acquired Heinz, when they acquired Kraft, etc. Tens of thousands of people are laid off. immediately, right? 20% of the workforce. And then everybody else is put on a strict regimen of reducing cost, constantly increasing margins, increasing revenues. Life becomes hellish. Life becomes very difficult for everybody when 3G capital comes into town. Now, you contrast that with Bob Chapman and this book I wrote, Everybody Matters. Bob has acquired 120 companies now. All of them were struggling and dying businesses. And he has turned them all around. They are now thriving and profitable. And the people there were suffering before and they're getting laid off frequently. And now they have a future. Their children have a future. Their towns have a future. Same business, same location, same people. Now thriving, and before it was not. And when I was with Bob a couple of years ago, and I said, Bob, what are you up to? He said, I'm going to acquire another 15, 20 companies this year. I said, Bob, why do you need that? You've got more than enough money. You have 26 grandchildren. Why do you need to keep acquiring companies? Why don't you just enjoy your life? And he said, Raj, I don't know how much time I have left. And on my deathbed, I will not be proud of the money I made or the machines we built. I will be proud of the lives I touched. And I want to touch as many lives as I can before I die. And I said, Bob, you're not growing a business. You are spreading a healing ministry. When Bob Chapman comes to town, people have hope. There's a future. I think that's what we want to do in business. We want to grow because we have a business that makes everybody's life better. Then you have an obligation to go. Bob Chapman feels an obligation to grow. He works harder than ever because he wants to improve people's lives. That is not the energy that is driving 3G Capital. So what we need to do is to unleash healing. How do we unleash healing? Is by taking two things out of the corporate closet. There are two things that are hidden away inside, locked away inside the corporate closet. One is unexpressed love. I believe that all human beings have a tremendous need to care and to express their love. That's what we are. We are love, right? And I believe that unexpressed love is the most abundant but underutilized resource on this planet. People want to care, and yet when they go to work, there's no opportunity to do that. In fact, it's the opposite. Work is a place, put on your armor, put on your mask, and you go to battle. Right? You defeat the competitors, you capture some market share, you climb the corporate ladder, you backstab, all of that. There's no place for expressing your humanity and your love. So we need to release that. We need to allow people to express their love, and we need to also take out the silent suffering. People, if you could see a thought bubble over the head of everybody you meet in your office or even on the street and understand what they are dealing with in their life, what kind of burden they're carrying around, right? What they're worried about. Their mother just got Alzheimer's, their father just got cancer, their child just got addicted to opioids, they just lost their job, whatever it is. There's tremendous silent suffering and people don't talk about it. I say people are stoic and they are heroic. They carry around burdens that would crush you. And yet people show up and they do their job. It's quite heroic. And if we can create a corporate culture where you're allowed to speak and share your vulnerability and how you're suffering, and other people are also allowed to express their love, that love will heal that suffering. And the CEO doesn't have to heal everybody's suffering. We just create an environment in which everybody is doing that for everybody else. We unleash a tsunami of caring and healing inside the organization. So as we come out of the pandemic and as we come out of the economic downturn and everything else, we are not interested in going back to the old way of doing things. The new normal cannot be the old normal. It's like when you have an earthquake and your house crumbles, you don't build the same house again. You have to build a house now that is resilient and earthquake proof, right? Has to be stronger, has to be better, has to be more resilient. That's the kind of business we have to grow and build in the future, so that when the next calamity comes, when the next pandemic comes, when the next crisis happens, we don't have the same kind of suffering that we had this time. We are able to ride through that and get through those storms because we are better prepared. As I started writing this book and I went to a Chinese restaurant for dinner one day, and I got, I don't know if they do that in Brazil, but in America, you get a fortune cookie at the end of the Chinese meal. And I opened my fortune cookie and it said this: there are many ways you can be hurtful. There's only one way to heal, and that is through love. And so we have to bring love into our work. We have to convert our workplaces from what feels like a prison to what feels like a playground where there's joy, there's creativity, there's play, there's camaraderie, teamwork. And at the end of the book, we have what we call a healing oath. We want my leaders, if they are inspired and moved by this, to actually, like doctors have to take a Hippocratic oath before they become doctors. Leaders also have your life in their hand. Your life and your children's life is impacted by the quality of leadership. So we say you should take an oath. And it starts, there's a Latin phrase, primum non nocere, which means first do no harm. I will operate my business in a way that causes no harm to others. I will not be a source of suffering, is what that means, right? Malus eradicare, I will root out evil. I will never enable or collude with abuse or exploitation. I will stand up for fairness, truth, beauty, integrity, and basic goodness. Think in a country like Brazil or India, there's so much corruption and so many businesses are involved in bribes. If all business leaders take this kind of an oath and say, I will never do that, and together we will be united in order to fight those kinds of things. And then amor vincit omnia, which means love conquers all. I will operate from love and always measure success by the fulfillment, abundance, and joy I generate for all whose lives I touch. Okay, thank you very much. I know we took a little bit extra time, but hopefully we are flexible on that. And I will now stop sharing. Okay. You're muted, Pedro.
Não, Raj, estou refletindo um pouco aqui. Raj, muito obrigado pela essa palestra. Foi muito inspirador, tá? Tá te ouvindo aqui. Está sendo muito inspirador te ouvir. Foi lindo, mágico, tá? Para quem entrou durante a palestra, vocês podem migrar de português ou inglês aqui no Zoom, tá? Raj, te ouvindo... Dani, posso fazer a primeira pergunta? Obrigado, Dani. Raj, te ouvindo, é bastante chocante ouvir as histórias das pessoas, as histórias de vida, histórias pessoais. E fico me perguntando o quanto que as nossas questões pessoais, as questões que foram curadas ou não curadas, tá? Necessidades atendidas ou não atendidas, das nossas vidas pessoais, afetam aquilo que nós estamos fazendo no dia a dia. E um dos motivos de replicar a sua pesquisa aqui no Brasil foi a intenção de fazer um contraponto com a Lava Jato. Foram questões pessoais que influenciam nossas ações. Olhando a sua trajetória de vida pelos livros ali, é algo maravilhoso, é inspirador para a gente poder olhar a evolução do seu trabalho ao longo dos livros. Parabéns, tá? É algo maravilhoso isso. Queria ouvir de você sobre a história pessoal do Raj. O que te motivou a seguir a linha que você seguiu, tanto e até mesmo do seu processo de cura pessoal?
Yeah. Thank you. As I mentioned, I think that is the book I'm working on now. You know, when I worked on the healing organization, or when I was starting to work on it, I was in my normal mode that with every book, you know, I do all the research, I do the interviews, and then I set aside a few months where I go away by myself and I do the writing retreat and so forth, you know. So I was just following that process. And then 3 people told me separately, they're all women, by the way. One was Nilima, with whom I wrote Shakti Leadership. And she said, Raj, you need to slow down. You need to work on your own healing, right? Come with us to a trip to the Himalayas in India, actually the border with China. So we went on a Shakti Leadership trip when I turned 60 that year. And we spent about 8 or 10 days immersed in a deeply Buddhist part of the world. Some deep spiritual wisdom there about suffering, right? Buddhism is about how do we deal with suffering. And so that was pretty profound. And then Lynn Twist, who started the Pachamama Alliance, which is about bringing indigenous wisdom from the Amazon rainforest into the world and connecting that, right, to the modern world. And she said to me, I had a dream, you need to come with us on our trip to the Amazon. I said, I have a book deadline. She says, no, you need to come with us. you will learn more about healing here than anything else. So I delayed my book by 5 months. I said yes to Amazon rainforest. I spent 10 days there with 2 different native peoples. And I also went on a silent retreat, which was 4 days, and that really caused me to reflect inside and understand myself and my own journey through life. And I had a coach for the first time. And all of this started to then enable me to understand myself, my own life journey over 62 years now, and why I have been drawn to this kind of work. And I've actually come to understand it. It had to do, first of all, with who I was as a child, right? I have to know myself. The first step, I'm calling it now the awakening to inner peace, purpose, and healing. And it starts with knowing yourself. You have to know who you are. Not your title, not your degrees, not your religion, not your name, but who are you as a soul? What is your essential quality? And I had to go back and think about myself as a child. I said I was a very innocent child. I mean, all children are innocent, but I was even more. But I was very idealistic. I was very peace-loving, right? I was very trusting. I trusted everybody. And that was my essential true nature. But then I was born into this community in India, which is the very warrior. We have the warrior class. We have the 4 castes of the Brahmins, and then the warriors, and then the business people, and then the untouchables. I was born in the warrior class, and that's a very hyper masculine, patriarchal, even feudal system. So I was born into the extreme opposite of my own nature. But I was brought up by a mother who was completely pure love, unconditional love, compassion, etc. And my father was absent. He was away getting his PhD and his education. So anyway, I was shaped by my mother. I was already born like that. So that was my true nature. So I came to realize that. But then when my father came back, he saw this child. He said, you cannot be idealistic. You cannot be trusting. You cannot be, you need to be rough and tough. You need to be practical. You need to not trust anybody, right? He told me to be the opposite of what I was. And that continued for 40 years, right? Where I was trying to be somebody that I was not. I was trying to be the opposite of what I was. I came to believe that everything that came naturally to me was a defect, right? That I was born with some defects, some problems, that I have to figure out how to be the opposite of my own true nature. Right? And therefore I was miserable, and I was not effective in my work because I'm trying to be somebody that I'm not. Right? So the second step is you have to know yourself is step 1. The second step is you have to love yourself. And how do you love yourself? You have to come to recognize that those are your gifts, and you have to be grateful for what those gifts are. And you have to see them as a strength, not as a weakness. So eventually, about 15 years ago, I was guided. I was doing, traditional research, traditional books and papers and everything. But then I started onto this path, which led to the book Forms of Endearment, where I discovered it's possible to do business in a way it's rooted in love and care and compassion and empathy, right? And there's an idea of all the principles of conscious capitalism, higher purpose, etc. And that's when I felt, oh my God, this is, I was, for the first time, I was crying. Literally, I had tears in my eyes as I'm trying to write that book. And I said, I've never had tears of joy connected to my work. I always had tears of frustration or anger. So I said, wow, I think my purpose just found me. This is what I want to bring to the world, because this is what touches me at a soul level. So know yourself, love yourself, and then be yourself. Now I said, now I know what to do in the world, because this is who I'm supposed to be, right? And so there are more steps on that journey. The next one was choose your life, embrace your life. Everything that happened with my father, with my grandfather, why was I born and that? What I could have said like a victim, like why did I have to have that kind of childhood? What kind of upbringing? Or I can say, because I experienced the hyper masculine when I was a child, therefore, 45 years later, I wrote a book about feminine, because I had to experience the opposite in order to become sensitive to that, right? So I decided I embrace everything in my life, even the negative experiences, the difficult people. You choose it all. You embrace your life and be grateful for it. Right? So these are some of the steps that I went through in order to understand and make sense for myself. And I believe they're more universal. You know, as Nilima says, that which is deeply personal is also completely universal. It applies to many people, or maybe all people, right? That we can think about life in a different way. And then the last piece of it came when I worked with a coach that summer. And I told her my life story, and I told her how my work had changed and my relationship to my father and everything, my mother. And she said that, do you realize that you have been honoring your mother with your work for the last 15 years? That you spent 45 years trying to impress your father and feel like you are worthy of your father, right? And that was a losing game for me. Right? That could never have, doesn't matter what I did, I would not impress him, and nor would that make me satisfied. And then you figure out that ultimately your path is actually more along the lines of what your mother, that what your mother has is what the world needs. And that is your job, your destiny is to bring that message to the world. And so everything that has followed conscious capital is all a reflection of that same energy that's in forms of endearment, right? It started there. And the interesting thing was then she said, does your mother know that you have been honoring her with your work for 15 years? I said, I didn't know that until 2 minutes ago. How would she know that? So she said, you must call her and tell her that. And I said, oh, we don't talk like that in my family. You know, we always talk about the weather, or we talk about, you know, how's your health? And she said, no, you need to call her and tell her that. I said, no, my father will pick up the phone and he puts it on speakerphone. And then he says, if he hears me talk like this, he will say, what's wrong with him? Why is he talking like that? She said, I don't care. You need to call her. I said, I'm going to India in 3 weeks. I'll tell her myself in person. She said, no, your mother is 81 years old. You don't know what happens in 3 weeks. You have to call her. And so I called her. And when I told her this, you know, I call her mommy. I said, everything I've been doing in the world for the last 15 years that people have cared about, that has changed people's lives, and it is because of what you taught us. In 62 years, she never got angry at me. She never, you know, she never thought about herself. All she did was love us and take care of us. And we just took that for granted. And when I started telling her that, she just started crying. She says, no, 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 I am nothing. I am nothing. And I said, no, you are everything. What you have done is priceless. And that is what I have brought now into my life and into the world. You know, the world has enough of what my father stands for. There's too much of that energy in the world. What you have is what the world needs. She always thought of herself, because she only got educated until the 8th grade. She did not speak English. You know, my father was a brilliant scientist, PhD, gold medal winner. So she always thought that she's nothing, you know. And the fact is, that is the most important thing. So that was, to me, very healing for me and for her. And so that's kind of been my journey, you know. And part of it also was, by the way, in Brazil, in Ecuador, when we went to the rainforest, you know, we had a ceremony with a shaman, and we had an ayahuasca journey there. And I got tremendous wisdom about healing from the ayahuasca, you know, from that experience and altered consciousness. I believe that I was receiving messages, which I'm sharing in this new book. It's not in the healing book, but I'm going to share all of that experience. The last chapter of the book is my journey into the Amazon rainforest. You know? So that was a long answer to your question.
Incrível, incrível a resposta. E muito inspiradora. Raj, eu gostaria de perguntar para você, você fala que as empresas deveriam curar, e o que eu queria saber é, essas empresas, elas escolhem uma forma de curar? Isso tem a ver com o seu propósito? Ou tem a ver com alguma outra coisa que existe dentro dessas empresas que as mobilizam para essa cura?
Different what?
Se as empresas escolhem o que curar, se isso tem a ver com o propósito ou se tem a ver com alguma outra coisa.
You know, it's usually there's a life experience for the leader. That's why my company is called Awaken Inc., and that's why my new book is called Awakening to all these things, because there has to be, your consciousness has to be awakened. Bob Chapman went through awakenings in a church, at a wedding, and somewhere else. Suddenly, his way of looking at life and his way of thinking about his work changed, right? And suddenly he said, "Oh my God, the way I've been doing it is causing all kinds of harm, and I need to think about it differently." So it often happens when the leader goes through some kind of a crisis or some kind of an awakening in their life, and then they are transformed. So I think that's the most common way. Other cases, it's just the consciousness of that leader. If you have a leader who's already an evolved consciousness, who's what they call an old soul, that they are connected to all of these higher values, then they will reflect that into the work. But in either case, as I said, the consciousness of the leader places an upper limit on the consciousness of the organization. So if the leader breaks through, then the organization will break through. If the leader goes from being a hurting presence in the world, right, to a healing and loving person, then that will show up in the culture of the organization as well. Right? So I think the organization is simply like a magnifying glass of what's the consciousness of the leader. Right? And so we have to therefore focus on the leaders and figuring out how to deepen their consciousness, how to heal them. The biggest, most important responsibility of a leader is to heal them. Just like I had to heal myself to write this book, because we said this is a sacred undertaking to write a book about healing. And we therefore have to make sure that we are doing everything we have to do in order to do justice to that title, right? Likewise, I think every leader, we have to focus on what is their trauma, every single person has trauma, okay? Some have more, some have less. You don't have to go to Vietnam or you don't have to go to Afghanistan to get trauma, okay? Just growing up is traumatic enough. And most childhood experiences. So there's lots of that. There's ways to address that and deal with it and heal ourselves, right? So we have to heal ourselves, and then we have to bring the healing to other people.
Pedro?
Raj, muito obrigado. Vou tentar aqui juntar algumas perguntas. Tem várias pessoas tendo uma série.
Sorry, I didn't hear the English of that.
Jade, pode repetir, por favor?
Pedro, a Jade precisou beber uma água, então ela pediu uma pausa rapidamente.
Okay.
Maybe in the meantime, I can answer this question somebody has asked. Can you cite example of business leadership in Brazil that exercises healing leadership? Well, I think the research that you have done, Pedro, and I think you have a book and also the paper, and there are, I think, 22 companies that you have identified, including, I think, Natura certainly is one of them. The Albert Einstein Hospital, which is not really a business, but still an organization, is one. And there are many others. What's the one, Ronnie's company?
22.
Sorry?
22 companies.
22. What is the name of Ronnie's company? Ronnie's company.
Reserva.
Yeah, so there are quite a few, and I think this book, this research will show that. Yeah, Reserva. Yeah.
So Raj, meanwhile, we expect Jade come back, which is the translation. How do you see the Brazilian research linking to this concept of healing organizations?
Well, your research, as you know, was rooted in firms of endearment. In that paradigm, I think this is all a continuum, right? I mean, my journey is one. We started out firms of endearment, then we called it conscious capitalism, and so the consciousness side became more important to understand, and then the feminine side became more important to understand with Shakti leadership, and then business as a family, and then people as the purpose became kind of the understanding from Everybody Matters. And now from this book, it's the idea that business is fundamentally about healing. It's about us taking care of each other. In a free market, democratic capitalist society, government doesn't take care of our needs. Right? Government provides the infrastructure, rule of law, a few other things. But businesses are given the opportunity, but also then the responsibility of taking care of people, of meeting all their needs for housing, for food, for education, everything, right? And therefore, we have to do it in a way that heals, right? So if we actually do it from an energy of we're here to care for people, right? To express my own values and my own purpose through the business and care for people and meet their real needs, then you will heal them. But if you say that I'm going to meet my needs by using the people as employees, as customers, as investors, then I'm going to hurt them because I will exploit them. I will pay my people as little as possible. I will charge my customers as much as possible. I will do clever advertising to convince them what is not true, right? I will do all these things just to maximize my own profit. And that is going to cause suffering for everybody. So the energy with which we conduct business is ultimately whether it becomes healing or not. And I think the idea of healing is an easy one for people to understand. Initially, they think, oh, what's a healing organization? How can that be? But then people understand it, right? And it can go deeper. It's like super conscious capitalism, if you will, or hyper conscious, right? There is no limit to consciousness in our journey as a human being. I mean, the limit to consciousness, you become like a god, right? You become divine. Likewise, there's no limit to a conscious business. You can just do so much more than you think is possible, right? So I think healing organization is simply an evolution on that spectrum of deeper and deeper and more loving consciousness, where you are actively seeking out opportunities to heal. Bernie Glassman did not start a bakery because he said, wow, there's not enough bakeries in Yonkers, New York, and there's an opportunity for me to make money starting a bakery. He started a bakery because he said, this is one of the richest counties in America with one of the highest rates of homeless people. And I can create a business that I can easily train them to do, and I can uplift their lives. So the energy behind it, right, was a healing energy. And one of the last things I would say, what we learned from Bernie, and he's a Buddhist Zen master. Actually, he died while we were writing the book. We dedicated the book to him and to Herb Kelleher, who both died. But it's the idea of bearing witness. You have to bear witness to the suffering that's out there. You have to, many of us, if we see something, that's hard to look at, we will turn away or close our eyes. He said, no, you have to go and be present. So when he became passionate about homelessness, he actually took groups of people and they lived on the street for 1 week with the homeless people. And at the end of that week, they understood the whole picture of their suffering. And he said, from that bearing of witness, loving action will naturally arise. You will know what to do from a place of love once you bear witness to that suffering. In our companies, if the CEO came down from the 30th floor and actually mingled with the people who do the actual work, whether it's in a factory or whether it's out in the field, wherever it is, the hourly paid people, and they understood their struggle and their life and how hard they work and how difficult that work is. We think that, oh, they get paid minimum wage. That means their work must be simple and easy. They are working harder than the CEO, okay? And yet they have to worry about food and they have to worry about losing their home and everything, right? So we have to bear witness. Every manager, every executive should be required to actually spend time doing the core work of the business and living and breathing with those people and understand. And then have a commitment not to view people as a cost, to say, HEB, one of the other companies in our book, so founded by the grandmother of the current CEO, a very religious, spiritual woman, started this company. It's full of love, this company. It's the biggest company in Texas, and it's the biggest grocery chain. They pay their people extremely well, and their prices are lower than Walmart. They are the biggest donor to the state of Texas. They show up when there's a flood or emergency. They show up before the Red Cross, before the emergency management agency. And that CEO tells his executives, please pay our people as much as possible. Please pay our people as cashiers, the frontline people in the supermarket. Please pay them as much as possible, not as little as possible. Most businesses, if you're profit maximizing, you say employee is a cost to minimize. How can we have less employees and how can we pay them as little as possible? He says, no, pay them as much as possible and design a business model around that so they can look after their family, they can have some joy and security in their life. That's the healing consciousness. And as I said, it's the most successful and largest company in Texas, right? When you do this, you achieve business results as well. But those are the outcome of the superior love and care that you are showing in the world. Okay, are we out of time? Are we?
Acho que a gente pode fazer uma mais, uma final. Dani, você quer trazer uma pergunta ou eu trago? Tem várias perguntas aqui, tá?
Tem várias. Tem uma que eu tinha separado, mas o professor acabou de responder. Então, por favor, Pedro, pode fazer a próxima.
Tá. Eu vou tentar juntar uma série de perguntas aqui, Raj, de algumas pessoas. A Júlia trouxe no YouTube a seguinte reflexão, que tendo negócios que não curam, a sensação que a gente tem é que a gente tem que reduzir o volume de negócios do mundo, para o nosso planeta poder respirar. Ela queria saber a sua visão, se a gente tendo empresas que curam, a gente vai precisar de ter mais negócios ou não. A gente tem que reduzir o volume de negócios do mundo. E queria juntar também essa pergunta desse contexto, tá? Com a pergunta da Francine e da Denise, para você trazer exemplos de empresas. Quais são os melhores exemplos de empresas que curam que você poderia trazer para a gente?
Really, do we need more businesses? I mean, yeah, we need more healing and conscious and caring businesses. Capitalism is a very dynamic system. So businesses that do not serve their stakeholders well, that do not create value for everybody, will ultimately not survive. And other businesses that are doing that will succeed better, and they will grow and evolve, right? So gradually, those old hurting businesses will get replaced by more healing businesses in the world, I believe, as our consciousness is evolving, as our expectations are rising, as we have the millennials and the young people who are much more rooted in purpose and values compared to the older generation. So that's a process that I think will happen, but we're trying to accelerate that process. We're saying, don't do this as a defensive reaction to competitive pressures. Do this as a proactive affirmation of your own love and your values in business. Express that. And the business success will follow. I think our research and what Pedro is doing with his PhD research, we are giving people some level of confidence that if you do the right thing from a human standpoint, that the business case will take care of itself. It will work. Okay. You have to have some confidence and faith, and we show you the data that, yeah, this is why these businesses succeed better. So yeah, we need more businesses that are conscious and caring, and that will happen over time. But we want to accelerate. See, we can't wait 50, 100 years. Meanwhile, the world is getting damaged and people are being hurt. So there's a sense of urgency about it. I did see a couple of questions here about stakeholder capitalism. How important is the theme to reach I think that's very important. Last year in 2019, stakeholder capitalism, purpose, Business Roundtable and Davos both embraced that. So we're actually close to a tipping point. We are arriving at a point where the paradigm is shifting, where the old idea of profits and shareholder value as being the only purpose is going to go away, and every company will have to have a purpose, and we'll have to think about all stakeholders. So, that's a fundamental paradigm shift. It's like the Berlin Wall moment in November of 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell down. Before that day, the world looked like one thing, and after that day, the world looked different. And suddenly the debate between communism and capitalism was finished, right? And likewise, I think this debate between shareholders capitalism and stakeholder capitalism is a similar idea. Shareholder idea was never a good idea, and it has done so much damage, and I think now it's about to die on its deathbed. We have to let it go.
Raj, foi ótima a noite, tá? Tem várias perguntas aqui, mas a gente está já chegando ao final do evento. Muito obrigado pelas histórias que você trouxe, inclusive a sua história de vida para nós. foi muito inspirador. A gente postergou um pouquinho o tempo do evento para poder te ouvir mais. Os comentários são super positivos. As perguntas que não foram respondidas, eu vou depois coletar e a gente garante de responder para vocês depois, pessoal. Queria aqui agradecer primeiro o Raj por ter aceito o convite, por estar aqui hoje conosco. Foi muito inspirador e gerou várias reflexões em mim mesmo, tá? Fiquei vários momentos aqui refletindo. Dani, obrigado por ter aceito o convite, de também apoiar essa facilitação nesse momento com o Raj. Queria fazer um agradecimento muito especial à Jade. Ela ficou o tempo todo, nesse momento, fazendo a tradução. Então, quando eu ou a Dani estávamos perguntando, ou quando o Raj estava falando, a Jade estava o tempo todo fazendo tradução para o Raj. Muito obrigado, Jade. Ela teve que fazer uma pausinha para tomar uma água. Você foi maravilhosa, Jade. Muito obrigado. Queria fazer um agradecimento especial também à Jéssica Francini e ao Tiago, com a tradução de Libras. A equipe de vocês arrasa, vocês são maravilhosos. Muito obrigado mesmo. Queria agradecer também a toda a equipe da Humanizadas e do Grupo Anga e dos parceiros. Não vou citar os nomes, senão vou esquecer. E também dos parceiros do Instituto Capitalismo Consciente Brasil, do Sistema B, HSM, todas as organizações que apoiam o Festival Alma a acontecer. Muito obrigado a todos vocês que estiveram presentes no festival. Queria fazer algumas palavrinhas finais.
I want to thank you as well. Thank you, Jade, for your translation. It's not easy to keep up with all of this. You must be exhausted. You should now take a
Queria só agradecer.
rest and a break and maybe a glass of wine. Thank you, Pedro, and thank you, Daniela, and everybody else from CC Brazil. It's just one of our great conscious capitalism communities in the world is the Brazilian community. And we are really grateful to Hugo and all the leaders who have come before and who are still working with this. Thank you. And I look forward to being with you in person.
E eu gostaria, Raj, de agradecer em nome de toda a comunidade do capitalismo consciente brasileira, todos os nossos novos embaixadores que estão aqui vendo você pela primeira vez, todos os associados e todas as empresas que seguem conosco todos os dias construindo o capitalismo consciente de uma forma muito forte, muito vigorosa aqui no país. A sua presença é para nós muito inspiradora e essa noite foi, sem dúvida, uma das melhores e mais ricas mensagens que você poderia passar para nós. Muito obrigada por estar conosco, hoje e sempre, por entregar essa obra que você está entregando para a gente hoje, que é o lançamento do seu livro, com o qual a gente vai cuidar com imenso carinho aqui no Brasil, para todas as pessoas que nos seguem.
Pessoal, hoje é o lançamento oficial do livro Empresas que Curam, do Raj. Quem quiser comprar o livro, tem um QR Code aqui para acessar. Mesmo no momento de pandemia, vocês vão estar recebendo o livro, uma mensagem do próprio Raj, ao comprarem o livro. Então, aqui na tela tem um QR Code para vocês acessarem. Além do livro, gostaria de fazer o convite para todos e todas que estão nos assistindo aqui. As inscrições para a pesquisa Empresas Humanizadas do Brasil, elas estão abertas até setembro de 2020. Essa pesquisa é inspirada no trabalho do professor Raj Sisodia, tem o professor Raj como um dos mentores. A participação na pesquisa é gratuita, então gostaria de convidá-los a participarem. Tem um QR Code para vocês se inscreverem também para a segunda edição da pesquisa brasileira. Para quem gostar de deixar algum questionário de feedback, uma avaliação, comentários positivos ou negativos, coisas que a gente tenha que melhorar no Festival Alma, tem um QR Code também para um questionário de feedback de vocês. Nossos parceiros, a MIT Sloan e a HSM Management, estão dando desconto de 25% nos seus produtos, e vocês podem acessar esse desconto por meio do QR Code que está aqui. Para encerrar, a gente vai ter 2 músicas da Jazz. E antes de encerrar, gostaria de só contar uma história para vocês que aconteceu essa semana no meio do Festival Alma, que é uma história da Grazi, uma das conselheiras do Instituto Capitalismo Consciente Brasil. A Grazi, ela precisou levar a tia, de 96 anos, para fazer uma cirurgia. E eu vou ler aqui para vocês o relato da Grazi levando a tia de 96 anos para fazer uma cirurgia no hospital. Indo para o centro cirúrgico, minha tia me diz: acho que estou ficando velha, né? Eu vou ter que operar. Mas fala para a médica fazer um corte pequeno para não ficar uma cicatriz feia, tá bom? A tia segura a mão da Grazi e diz novamente para a Grazi: eu vou ficar bem. Tenho tanta coisa ainda para fazer. Eu falo e me arrepio. A Grazi comenta que naquele momento ela viu tanta vida naqueles olhos de 96 anos. Nossa, muita reflexão. Ontem ela recebeu alta e a Grazi sentiu vontade de compartilhar essa história e eu estou aqui compartilhando a história com vocês também. Por que eu estou compartilhando e por que a Grazi compartilhou a história com vocês? Porque a gente ainda tem tanta coisa para fazer nessa vida e que não nos falte luz, que não nos falte brilho nos nossos olhos para fazer tanta coisa que a gente tem que fazer ainda. Gostaria de encerrar o Festival Alma, essa 5ª edição, com esta história da Grazi. Jess, é com você o encerramento.
Tudo muito emocionante, obrigada. Obrigada a todos, obrigada Raj. Estou muito sensibilizada. Para fechar, escolhi com sugestão de Pedro, uma música que fala da revolução, mas Pedro, não escolhi a versão dos Beatles, escolhi a versão original, que é da Nina Simone. E só aqui falar uma parte da música que é maravilhosa, que diz numa parte: se tenho que nadar todo o oceano só para me comunicar, vou nadar. Nina foi uma mulher que nunca ficou calada e que foi a voz de muitas pessoas que precisavam da voz dela, por isso sou muito fã. Então vou com essa versão de Revolution da Nina Simone, que diz assim: now we got a revolution, 'cause I see the face of things to come. Yeah, your constitution, well, my friend, it's gonna have to bend. I'm here to tell you about destruction of all the evil that will have to end. You know it's gonna be all right. You know it's gonna be all right. Well, all right. Some folks are gonna get the notion, I know. They say I'm preaching hate, but if I have to swim the ocean, well, I would to communicate. It's not as simple as talking jive, the daily struggle just to stay alive. You know it's gonna be all right. It's gonna be all right. Well, all right. I'm thinking about a revolution because we're talking about a change. It's more than just evolution. Well, you know, you gotta clean your brain. The only way that we can stand the fact is when you get your foot off our back. You know it's gonna be all right. It's gonna be all right. Well, all right. Depois, um ano depois dela escrever e compor essa música, os Beatles fizeram a versão deles, um pouquinho mais pop, também maravilhosa, The Revolution. E Também, um segundinho aqui. Escolhi outra música da Nina Simone, porque ela enfatiza muito o direito à igualdade. E nessa música fala do direito a ser livre, porque o povo dela não se sentia livre, não conseguiu, nessa época, nos 60s e 70s, sentir-se livre, algo que para nós é muito difícil de imaginar, não poder ser livre e tomar decisões, não poder ir no mesmo ônibus que outras pessoas, não poder ir no mesmo banheiro que outras pessoas, não poder ir no mesmo hotel que outras pessoas. Então, é uma música muito linda e se chama I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free. Tomara soubesse como se sente ser livre. Da Nina Simone. I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all the chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things that I should say them loud, say them clear, for the whole round world to see. I wish I could share all the love that's in my heart, remove all the bars that keep us apart. I wish you could know what it means to be me, then you see and I agree that every man should be free. I wish I could give all I'm longing to give. I wish I could live like I'm longing to live. I wish you could know what it means to be me, then you'd see and agree every man should be free. I wish I could be like a bird up in the sky. How sweet it would be if I know I could fly. I'd soar to the sun and go down the sea. Then I'll sing, 'cause I know. Then I'll sing, 'cause I know. Then I'll sing, 'cause I know how it feels to be free. Obrigada.
Obrigado, Jazz. Maravilhoso. Pessoal, até mais. Muito obrigado a todos e a todos que estiveram presentes.